everyone! Today I'm going to be going over how I personally style a Natsu wig from Fairy Tail since I've gotten quite a few requests for him. The wig I'm using as a base is a Helios and Princess Dark Pink mix from Epic Cosplay Wigs. The first thing I do before starting this wig is ponytail off the excess hair on the bottom and cut it off to save for later. Once I've got my chunks, I set them aside for safekeeping. Next, I tease the top of the wig so I can get a feel of where I want to shape my spikes for him. Teasing before rubber banding things off helped me to better visualize where I wanted things to go because the sections were already standing upright. So I took my time, working from the front hair part and moving my way down the sides of his head. I also rubber banded a row or two behind the front spikes since I knew those would also be seen from the front and wanted to make sure everything lined up okay. Once I've got my silhouette sectioned off, I start cutting. I didn't really worry about sectioning off any of the back spikes because they all just kind of flip outwards or down, so I left those to worry about later. So, starting at his part, I begin trimming down the hairs and shaping the spikes. To shape and smooth everything out, I go in with my teasing brush and add a bit more volume by backcombing, just to make sure everything will for sure stand up straight. Then I take my teasing brush and lightly brush the outer layer of the spike out to smooth it. Once it looks how I want it to, I lightly spritz the spike with some hairspray and set it with the hairdryer on low heat. If the spike is still too long, I trim it down a bit and repeat those steps until I'm happy with how it looks. If you're having trouble with teasing and sculpting spikes, I made another tutorial that's in real time that better explains this process that I'll have linked in the description for you. Anyways, I continue to do this all the way across the bangs and down the sides of the head. I always like to work on the hair that frames the face first, since those hairs have reference points you can use to line things up. Then every spike that moves further back has the spikes in front of it to line up with, and then you keep going and so on and so forth, if that makes any sense. For all the rest of the larger main spikes, I go back in with a teasing brush and tease the base some more before smoothing out my spike chunk and spraying it in place with some hairspray. Natsu's hair is just kind of flippy, and once you get past the first few chunks in the front, there's no real definition, so I just kind of find sections that look like a good place for a spike, grab a chunk, and spike it. I also looked up a figure of Natsu to see how they decided to model his hair in the back and tried to imitate that a bit. Basically, I did my best to space things out in a way that looked as even as possible without messing up the silhouette from the front. Now, this part is totally optional, but it bothered me, so I went the extra step here. Remember those chunks of hair we cut off earlier and set aside? It's time to grab them because we're going to cover that hairline in the front. To do this, I'm using a clear contact cement by Patex. This stuff is great because it dries a lot faster than regular glues, so you can easily and quickly make wefts out of hair scraps. Alright guys, disclaimer time. I have no idea the proper way how to use this stuff, as I'm relatively new to using it on my hair. This is just what I found to work from my own messing around and experimentation. Also, this stuff is toxic. If you've ever used contact cement, you'll know there is a very strong odor, so please use it in a well-ventilated space. You have been warned, proceed at your own risk. Now, back to the video. So, to do this, I take a small chunk of hairs from my pile and begin squeezing out the contact cement onto the ends of the fiber, making sure I coat both sides really well. Next, I take my fingers and smooth out the glue while it's still really wet, squishing the hairs together to make sure it's all coated evenly. Make sure when doing this not to stroke it too many times, because once the stuff starts to dry, it'll start making ugly glue beads when you touch it. But once it's totally coated, just set it off to the side to dry for a minute. If you're scared about using this glue, you can totally use clear tacky or Elmer's glue to do the exact same thing. The only downside is there's a much longer drying time. Other than that, I found it works pretty much the same. So, once we've got all our little weft sections glued, I like to take them and snip the bottoms to try to make them look more like a hairline as possible. By this I mean, I make it a little bit uneven at the bottom by cutting out triangle-like shapes and feathering the stiff glue ends, as you can hopefully see here. Once I like the way it looks, I take my hot glue gun and glue the section onto the front so that it hangs low enough to hide the wig's old hairline. Then I keep adding these little sections of wefts until I'm happy with how the new hairline looks. After these are added, I make sure to trim them and add them into the spikes that sit behind them. Once my spikes are ready to go, I go over all my spikes with the clear tacky glue, twisting the hairs together at the end to seal the tips off. Then I trim off any hairs that are longer to clean things up. Last but not least, I spray down my wig with 4 to 5 coats of hairspray, drying each coat in between sprays just to make sure it stays in one piece for as long as possible. And then I'm done. So, that's how I style a Natsu wig. I hope this walkthrough helped, and if there are any other wigs you'd like to see me style, please leave your suggestions in the comment section below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope this helps you with your own wig adventures.